Guess what happened in Colombia? Hang on. Colombia, the uncola. A coconut.
My goddaughter is Colombian.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here we go. Gustavo Petro wins the election, becoming Colombia's first leftist leader. The former rebel and longtime senator's victory sets the third largest nation in Latin America on a sharply new path. Wow. Wow. How bad does a right-wing government have to screw up? For the first time, Colombia will have a leftist president. Gustavo Petro, a former rebel and a longtime legislator, won Colombia's presidential election on Sunday, galvanizing voters frustrated by decades of poverty and inequality under conservative leaders, with promises to expand social programs, tax the wealthy, and move away from an economy that he called overly reliant on fossil fuels. How bad does a right-wing government have to screw up for a former leftist rebel to win a free election for the first time in Colombian history? How bad? Well, his victory sets the third largest nation in... Oh, we already did that, right? High levels of deforestation in the Colombian Amazon, a key buffer against climate change, and a growing distrust of key democratic institution, which has become a trend in the region. Oh, here it is. His victory sets the third largest nation in Latin America on a sharply uncertain path, just as it faces rising poverty and violence that have sent record numbers of Colombians to the United States border.
I didn't know Colombia was doing on that.
Well, I'm pretty sure it has to do with the drug war. So a lot of people, when you get a lot of immigrants coming to the United States, it's because the United States is enforcing a drug war. And so what that does is the drug cartels arm themselves, and then it's gang violence all the time.
You have war refugees, basically.
So then it's basically, so it's basically a narco war. And then just like you have war refugees from Syria and Afghanistan and Libya and Iraq and now Ukraine, we have those refugees of the drug war. That's what this is. That's what a lot of it is. And then a lot of it is economics, which is also imposed on it by the neoliberals and the capitalists in the United States. Petro has pledged to govern with what he has called the politics of love, based on hope, dialogue, and understanding. So look for him to be quickly deposed in a coup.
Yeah, he's as good as... That's a big target.
That's do you don't want to get that? Why don't you just shoot a flare into the CIA building? What are you doing? Okay, Mr. Go ahead, Jackson.
This guy, there's been this wave of leftists that have been elected in Latin America who all condemn Venezuela, condemn Nicaragua, say that their elections are bogus, whatever. This guy's VP is funded by Sweden, USAID, Ford Foundation. So there are some sus things here that I think, we should keep an eye out on.
So if you're looking for a wet blanket in Colombia right now, Jackson Hinkle just provided it. If you want to know. No, that is true. So we're going to get to that part. He makes good points, of course. I'm teasing. Last year, Chile, Peru, and Honduras voted for leftist. Oh, there it is. That's what Jackson was just talking about. He was talking for leftist leaders running against candidates on the right, extending significant multi-year shift across Latin America. But what's the problem? There is a problem. So last year, Chile, Peru, and Honduras voted for leftist leaders running against candidates on the right. And, oh, man. And here, the United States, we just punched ourselves in the dick with the stupid sanctions, and we got a war with China scheduled. This couldn't have come at a worse time.
It's not convenient for us.
It really isn't. And by the way, to a degree, this includes Nicaragua also. Wouldn't you say, Jackson? It also includes Nicaragua. Yes, it does.
Nicaragua, whose elections, according to Mike Pompeo, are illegitimate.
Yeah. So Mr. Petro's win is all the more significant because of the country's history. For decades, the government fought a brutal leftist insurgency known as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, with the stigma from the conflict making it difficult for... So there was a brutal far leftist insurgency that were violent, and they were known as FARC, and they were armed, and they made it impossible for any kind of dialogue to happen or any kind of legitimate left to flourish. Not to mention the stigma of your name sounding like fart. You know what I mean? And by the way, in Colombia, brutal kidnappings. Brutal means kidnappings. That's what brutal. When they say brutal, they mean kidnappings, torture, landmines. That's what they mean by brutal leftists. Unlike brutal leftists here in America, where you're not a brutal leftist till you dye your hair blue. That's different. It's different down there. A brutal leftist does some real brutal shit. Okay. But the FARC signed a peace deal with the government in 2016, laying down their arms and opposing space for a broader political discourse. Mr. Petro has been part of a different rebel group. So the guy who just became president used to be in a rebel group, but it was called the M19, which demobilized in 1999 and became a political party that helped rewrite the country's constitution. So he was no longer a rebel. That means you're a mainstream MFer. He was part of a rebel group that demilitarized in 1990 and helped rewrite the country's constitution. So he's not a rebel at this point. He's just a legitimate candidate who won an election, right? The win could also test the United States' relationship with its strongest ally in Latin America. Traditionally, Colombia has formed the cornerstone of Washington's policy in the region. But Mr. Petro, it's how I feel like I'm calling him Mr. Gasoline. But Mr. Petro has...
Me too.
Doesn't it feel like that? Hey, what's up, Mr. Gasoline? Mr. Petro has criticized what he calls the United States' failed approach to the drug war. That's what we're talking about. Saying it was focused too much on eradication as a cocoa crop, the base product in cocaine, and not enough on rural development and other measures. Wow. Looks like somebody's not going to be invited to next year's Summit of the Americas. Am I right? Am I right?
Be on the outs with Juan Guaido.
Mr. Petro has said he embraces some form of drug legalization, that he will renegotiate an existing trade deal with the United States to better benefit Colombians, and that he will restore relations with the authoritarian, I like how they call it in the New York Times, the authoritarian government of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. The authoritarian government. He's just a socialist. That's all. He actually rises the poor out of poverty and gives them health care and housing. That's called an authoritarian to them. That's the New York Times, baby. Yeah. So by authoritarian regime, they mean one that imprisons political opponents and cracks down on peaceful protesters while poverty, unemployment, and inflation rise. Stay in your lane, Maduro. That's what they mean. Okay. Mr. Petro, in an interview earlier this year, he said he believed he could work well with the government of President Biden, adding that his relationship with the United States would focus on working together to tackle climate change, specifically halting the rapid erosion of the Amazon. Now, we all know the number one cause of the erosion of the Amazon is ranching, burning the forest to make room for cattle. And the United States is by far the number one consumer of beef in the world, according to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. And reducing the number of livestock will not be a priority for the Biden administration. Did you know that? But maybe Biden will host a cocktail party for Petro with the Sunrise Movement, where Rosario Dawson can auction off some indigenous artwork by by disappearing Amazonian tribes. Maybe that could happen. And hopefully Bono will donate a pair of sunglasses, if not his Ukrainian army uniform.
It's Bono's original uniform.
Mr. Petro believes the economic system is broken, overly reliant on oil export, and a flourishing and illegal cocaine businesses that he said has made the rich richer and the poor poorer. He is calling for a halt to all new oil exploration and a shift to developing other industries. Really? It's estimated that 13% of all Colombian cocaine stash went to Washington, D.C., and that's just for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Am I right? Come on. Come on. He also said he's going to introduce guaranteed work with basic income, move the country to a publicly controlled health system, and increase access to higher education, in part by raising taxes on the Why don't you just put a target on your chest?
Yeah, really.
Why don't you just put a target so it makes it easier for the CIA sniper to get you? Are you kidding? Do you really think he's going to do any? If he does one of those things, they'll kill him. Wow. And none of that, by the way, none of that sounds extreme. By the way, all of this is stuff that Democratic candidates promise they're going to do when they get elected. So promising it is okay, but doing it, that's the extreme radical thing. That's what they can't do. And here is DeSantis. Do you hear what he says? DeSantis says the election in Colombia is of a former narco-terrorist. Marxist, narco-terrorist Marxist is troubling and disappointing. The spread of left-wing totalitarian ideology. That is not what this is. This is unbelievable. This is like over-the-top pro wrestling talk.
It is.
It already makes me think he's not actually a Marxist, and he's possibly even to the right of Obama. When I hear a guy like Ron DeSantis trying to say shit like calling him a narco-terrorist Marxist, the spread of
call him a Muslim. That's how you know he's not quite as leftist as Obama.
The spread of left-wing totalitarian ideology in the Western Hemisphere is a growing threat. Florida stands with Colombian Americans on the side of freedom. No, see what they're doing is they don't have people. They don't want people to live under bridges like we have in the United States. So they're actually going to help them. And to him, he calls that authoritarianism. That scares the hell out of them.
How do you say, if you're not going to say their election wasn't valid, which is what Nicaragua is, how do you even pull that off? I mean, you stand with Colombia. Well, they voted.
They voted.
What do you mean you stand with them?
You stand with the people. No, you stand with no one. The people voted. Here's what Jeremy Corbyn said. Incredible news from Colombia with the election of a socialist president who has shown the power of community organizing to build a popular policy platform to heal the divisions of the past and bring about social justice.
He just made Paul Mason's network list
That's
of
right.
problems. Yeah.
But here's the problem. There is a little bit of a problem. Well, this is not the problem yet. Gustavo Petro, the new leftist president of Colombia, and this is what he said about Israel. The state of Israel discriminates against Palestinians like the Nazis discriminated against the Jews. So that's not going to win him any favors in the United States government, I'll tell you that. One of the reasons Gustavo Petro and the Colombian left despise the Israel apartheid state so much is because Israel sent people to train and lead the fascist far-right death squads that target the left. This is what Israel does all over the world. So
well, Gustavo Petro better not go home with any hookers that approach him, because that's going to be a Mossad honey trap.
Yeah, that is right. That is a honey trap. So let me just get to this part. Not to sound like such a downer. Okay, here we go. This is what Jackson was talking about earlier. This is Jose Marti. Hello, Jose Marti. He tweeted out, not to sound like such a downer, but Lenin Moreno, Pedro Castillo, and Gabriel Boric are all reasons to be cautiously ambivalent towards Gustavo Petro. Now, he's talking about the current president, the former president of Peru, the current president of Ecuador, and the current president of Chile, all of whom were elected as leftists, but were very disappointing. They followed a neoliberal agenda. Is that what you're talking about, Jackson?
Yeah. What I'm talking about is this guy and his administration, his lackeys are funded by, the same arms that are backed by George Soros. You look at USAID and the Ford Foundation. They're ushering in woke ideology into Latin America, and they're saying no to the idea of nationalizing their oil and yes to the idea of legalizing drug trades with the United States. And also the biggest thing, this is the most important part, they want to decrease Chinese investment into Latin America. That's the main underpinning behind all of it.
Yeah, because they're doing their Belt and Road Initiative, right? So United States, if it wants to get your natural resources, it overthrows your government and then installs a puppet government, right? Like Zelensky is a puppet, like the Shah was in Iran for all those years. I wonder who's in charge in Libya now. I'm sure it's a puppet. I don't even know who it is.
Gaddafi's son is running for president right now in Libya.
Really?
Yeah. But as for this, I could be wrong for all I know. I don't know. I don't live there. But we'll only time will tell. You know.
Yeah. So fingers crossed. It's I didn't know that about his vice president and the people running with him, that they were all being funded by the same old shifty neoliberals. I didn't know that part, but I know that the recent history. Of places like Peru, Chile, Ecuador, they've all started like this, then they all ended like Obama. Mm-hmm. So remember how excited we were in 2008 when Obama got elected? We were all so excited, and then by 2012 we were like, oh shit.
Yeah, there was a guy, another candidate, Hernandez, who was running for president in Colombia, and he was a populist who wanted to nationalize Colombia's oil industry. And work closer with China and investing in industrializing Colombia, and he was seriously out fundraised by the likes of the now president-elect.
So you're saying the real lefty got left behind, right? He didn't get as much funding. The guy who's the real lefty, of course, didn't get the funding. The guy who's the faux lefty, looks like you're saying, got all the funding, and he became president.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing that happened in Chile with Boric as well.
That's where identity politics comes into play in the United States, is that they'll fake you out. They'll give you a Pete Buttigieg who's just Mitch McConnell but gay.
Yeah, and with Soros, what he's been doing is he's creating all these higher level institutions, college campuses across the world. And he brings in this sort of like woke ideology to countries that don't have it and acclimates their youth towards this progressive social mindset. So when there's a first candidate that starts embodying these sorts of, slogans, they'll select them over a populist that might be better economically for the working people of their country.
Exactly right. So let's hope that this is not what happened. Let's try to wish President Petro all the luck in the world, and somehow he'll be able to resist the neoliberal capitalists who want to, not do all the stuff he says he wants to do. But if he can resist them, they're in his own cabinet, so it's going to be hard. Anyway, there you go. Fingers crossed. Maybe someday. And, if he starts becoming successful with the program he lays out, the United States will immediately start sanctioning him. And just like they're doing to Maduro and anybody else they don't like. What don't they like? They don't like anybody who won't let won't let Exxon or the capitalists come in and exploit their country. That's what they don't like. So if you're a guy who wants to nationalize your oil and give the profits to the people, they don't like that. That's what's happening. And that's what has happened forever. Read the Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
It's amazing, by the way, that China managed to compete by just merely doing debt slavery and not all the other crap that we do.
Yeah. They are going to do debt slavery.
Less pain to deal with them.
So what China's doing now is, instead of overthrowing governments in hostile coups and then installing puppets, what they're doing is they're just investing in their countries. Like, hey, you guys want to build whatever you want to build. You want to build a bridge. You want to build a water treatment plant. You want to build some locks in your harbor. You want to do whatever you want to do. They'll fund it for you, and then you pay them back. Now, a lot of people say it's just another form of imperialism, that they're doing what the IMF has been doing. So what the IMF does is it goes to poor countries, it gives them loans that they know they could never pay back, and then when they can't pay them back, they start taking their public spaces and privatizing them. Right. And so I wonder if that's what China's going to do. Some people say that's what they're going to do. They're like the new IMF. It's still better than bombing people.
It's still nicer. Way, it's still
way better. And then people end up with shit. They're actually building shit.
Yeah. The last thing I'll add, Brian Berletic, I just had a conversation with him. He's a China expert on my show. And he's been doing incredible work in breaking down how all of these projects like high-speed rail, they're actually already able to, these countries are already able to pay off China because of how successful the projects have been. Whereas, the United States, we can't even get like one mile of high-speed rail here, So they've been beneficial in the countries they've embarked in thus far, and they've been mutually beneficial.
Hey, we're doing stand-up dates: Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Chicago, Sacramento, and then San Diego, where I'm taping my new special. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets for all our live shows. We're coming to your town, maybe.